Today we're going to be hearing from Aubrey Marcus. Aubrey Marcus founded Onnit in 2010 as a nutritional supplements brand based on holistic health philosophy he calls total human optimization. And this talk is going to cover the technologies you can use to hack your consciousness, ensuring that you have every opportunity to go for your win. Inspired by his lifelong experience as a multi-sport athlete, as well as his background in ancient philosophy, Marcus's goal was to create a company that empowered customers to achieve their fullest human potential. And I'm really, really looking forward to hearing about how I can also achieve this. So let's give a big warm welcome to Aubrey Marcus.
Thanks, everybody. Man, this microphone seems like overkill, but we'll rock it. We'll rock it. All right, sounds good. So cool. Thank you for the intro and the bio. Yeah, as I said earlier, I really want this to be more of a conversation than a speech. I'm not going to sit here and talk at you guys. I really want to try to provide as much value as I can, but I'll give a little, background to maybe have some more jump-off points so that we can kickstart the conversation. So yes, in 2010, I founded Onnit, and that was really the culmination of a lifelong pursuit of something I call optimization. Which to me is at the heart of the human desire. And it's not just optimizing yourself, but optimizing this entire life experience. That's really what we're here to do. We get a chance to play this amazing game here in this dimension. And the goal should be to optimize it, get as much out of it as possible, not stay within some narrow band of, this is comfortable, but let's go out, let's see what we're capable of, let's see what this life is capable of bringing us. And that's been a relentless pursuit that I've had, pretty much my entire life. And played a lot of sports, still play a lot of sports, do a lot of athletics, challenge my mind. But really what this talk is about consciousness. And as I've discovered, that's probably the most significant aspect and driving force in my success and happiness is my pursuit of unlocking greater and greater access to my consciousness. And consciousness is a word that people kind of understand, but maybe not completely. So when I talk about consciousness, I'm really talking about the force that's animating our bodies, the force of life, our best self, not necessarily our mind and our emotions, not necessarily our body, but that other thing that's there when all of that fades away. And for anybody who's done a lot of psychedelic medicine, you understand what it means when all that fades away. And that's really where I learned about consciousness. That's been my path primarily, and I've been very open about it, is to use the great plant medicines of the world to kind of unlock and facilitate my access to that greater consciousness. So, when you're talking about that, you might think, oh, well, what's the point of that? Is that just spirituality? It's really not, because if you think about it, what's the one thing that's treated every known disease and ailment in the world? Does anybody know? The placebo effect. It's treated everything. Absolutely everything. The placebo effect is treated. Now, what is that thing? Well, the placebo effect is your mind or your consciousness telling your body that it's going to get well, and then the body responds. And I think we throw that away. Science is just like, yep, let's get that out of the picture. You're like, wait a minute. Your consciousness has treated every single disease condition that we've ever had. Maybe let's focus on that. Maybe let's look at that as a primary option instead of discarding that and trying to get rid of it at all options. So from your health to even the business, I have to credit a lot of what Onnit has become, and I feel very blessed to be CEO and founder of Onnit, and we've had a lot of accolades. We were an Inc. 500 fastest growing company in 2015, a lot of success, but what's not printed in the pages of Inc. magazine is a lot of that vision for what Onnit was going to become when I was blasted on a second cup of ayahuasca in the middle of the Peruvian jungle when I saw that, and so all of these things that people think, oh, that's just spirituality, that's just this thing, it all weaves together. When your consciousness is strong, it's like having the right force at the helm of the ship, not your emotions, not your fears, not your greed, not any of these other things, not your pain, but real consciousness. And consciousness has free will. It has the ability to drop in, decide what it wants for its life, and make genuine decisions. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can have. Now, it's not all about the plants. There's many other ways to access your consciousness. Of course, meditation. That's the basic primary one. And that's really the stilling of the mind. That's the quieting of the mind. Because in the stillness, in the quiet, that's where consciousness emerges. Really, everything else is just the distraction that keeps the mind focused on these shorter loops, keeps you worried about, oh, predators here, oh, someone to have sex with there, oh, here's some food over here. But when you get really still and all of that noise dies down, that's when your consciousness can emerge. And that's really what meditation is. And there's tons of different types of meditation, of course. And really, you just have to find the one that suits you. The problem with meditation for most people is they don't really know what state they're going for when they start it. They're like, yeah, I'm going to meditate. But what's the end goal? Like, you've never been there, so you don't really know if you're meditating or if you're just sitting still for a second. So that's when escalating that technology and using some other forms becomes really helpful. So one of those ways, of course, we got Kevin Johnson of Zero Gravity Float Institute here, is flotation tanks and sensory deprivation. And that's a hack that really allows, it's like facilitating meditation to the nth degree. And what it's doing is that mind that's constantly looking for perceptions out there in the world, trying to track things. What does this feel like? What does it smell like? What does this look like? What does this sound like? All of these things that are constantly barraging our mind with input, in these sensory deprivation tanks, all of that goes away. Stillness. And then the mind's like, I'm out of here, bitch. There's nothing to do. And then what comes out is either you fall asleep, which is not optimal, but it's nice, or your consciousness emerges, and that higher thinking, that larger loop thinking, that essential you is allowed to emerge. And then once you've been in the tank, then it's much easier to go back to your meditation practice and be like, okay, I know what I'm going for. I know what the goal is. So you can try these different techniques like Vipassana, where you're focusing on your breath, or open focus, where you're focusing on the empty spaces in your eyes, or some other more guided meditation. The meditation I like comes from Tom Brown, and it's called the Sacred Silence Meditation. And if anybody's interested in a guided version of that, I have a free one up on my website. That's the one I found to be the most effective. It's kind of utilizes a lot of different techniques, some visualization, some breath. But meditation is like the staple food. That's like what you need to survive. And then these other things can be more like feasts, like banquets. You get as much as you can, but you're going to need time to digest all that. So meditation is really important in the practice. Of course, floating, another great way to do it. Another thing is yoga. Yoga is another fantastic art. Again, been around thousands of years for a reason. And really that's working your mind through this exercise, linking it to breath and motion until you're, by moving outwardly and somatically embodying and focusing everything on that, it'll allow your mind to still. And those few moments in Shavasana and the final rest in yoga are some of the most peaceful, still moments that you'll find. And that's, again, another way to access your consciousness, really have that moment where everything gets still. Another way to do it that's, again, been around for thousands of years for a reason is dance. There's a reason that people have been doing these dance rituals all around the world, and it's something in the Western culture we forgot. We turn it into a party thing, which is great. It's fun to party and dance, but like an ecstatic dance ritual where instead of focusing on your breath, like in Vipassana meditation, you're just allowing the music to move your body and dumping out your mind of all the thoughts and just focusing on the somatic sensation of your body in motion and creating this kind of trance that will allow your consciousness to emerge. So if you look it up, there's different ecstatic dances being offered around town and really around the world. It's maybe not that widely publicized, but definitely take a look out for that. I'm going to be hosting one coming up pretty soon at Black Swan Yoga because I found it to be one of the best ways to do it. Because the thing about consciousness, especially with plant medicines, you tend to access it here, like you're projecting it out and experiencing it kind of outside of the body. But with dance, it gets right down into your feet, and your whole body becomes like a perceiving entity where you can really embody that consciousness. So that's been one of my favorite methods. Another one is shamanic breathing or holotropic breathing. pioneered by Dr. Stan Groff, but it's been around in different yogic circles for a long time. And then other different individuals like Wim Hof, the Iceman who has all the world records withstanding cold in a variety of different ways. But it's a process of hyperoxygenation. And through that process, it becomes almost like a psychedelic experience. And what emerges is a greater access to your consciousness. And so, again, another great opportunity to look around, look up shamanic breathing, holotropic breathing, something anybody can do. There's no drugs you need to take. There's nothing it's going to cost you. It's your own breath, and that's the beauty of a lot of these different practices is you don't need anything else to do it or facilitate it. And then, of course, there are the plants. And the plants are great for stubborn minds like myself. I mean, I couldn't shut this thing off if I tried. Like, there was just no way I could do it. I couldn't sleep. I can't, it's really hard for me. So the plants are more like a hammer. You really can't avoid it. It's going to hit you, and you're going to have to respond to it. You're going to have to surrender and allow it to take you on that journey of consciousness. And so that started for me when I was 18. I met a shaman, and we went out in the mountains of Mexico. And I took a batch of mushrooms in the mountains and had my first vision quest, so to speak. And in that, I experienced my consciousness removing from my body, looking down on my body, very much like a near-death experience like you hear, looking down on my body and going, oh, shit, there's something besides that thing, that meat sack, nice meat sack, but what is this thing that's looking at the meat sack? That's something else. And from that moment, I didn't have a religious upbringing or much of a spiritual practice until then, but at that point that I realized there was something else that wasn't the meat sack and wasn't the mind, I was like, oh, okay, well, this is something different, and I got to explore that for sure. And that was really kind of a game changer. And since then, I've done most of the major medicines of the world, Wachuma, ayahuasca, iboga. I've even tried some that I highly do not recommend, like the frog venom combo, which almost killed me in Topanga Canyon, which is a terrible idea, but we can talk about that if anybody's really interested. You're interested? You're like, you almost died. Yes. But each of these things has their own special gift that they're able to provide and their own special utilization, and I think learning about the nature of these medicines and what they can offer, and then trying to figure out which one is right for you, which one you're called to. And when you're doing that, really trusting your instincts, trusting what they call the calling, and then being super careful on who the provider is. Because just because it's an indigenous shaman doesn't mean that they're moral, doesn't mean that they're good, doesn't mean that they're not out trying to harm you, rather, or take your money. You got to understand that in this practice, especially in a lot of these jungle scenarios, what's the rule of the jungle? Yep, the rule of the jungle is the strong eat the weak, and everything goes long, and that's fine. The jungle sustains itself by the strong continually eating the weak. Well, the humans of the jungle are a part of the jungle. They are a part of the jungle. They're not separate from the jungle. Their spirit is generally identified with the jaguar, which is the strongest animal in the jungle. So you got to understand, for them, it's not a moral problem if you come to them weak and they're the jaguar and they eat you. That's just the law of the jungle. They're not bad. They're not bad people. Their friends don't look at them like, man, look at that jaguar eating weak people. It's just a normal thing. And we don't understand that because we're like, how dare they? Obviously, there's some great shamans. I've gone to many, many great healers who've dedicated themselves to a path of pure medicine and path of pure healing. But I like to throw that caveat out there because as this becomes more popular, more and more people go down, there's going to be situations where practitioners are going to take advantage of that to higher and higher degrees. So make sure you're being careful. I'll go a little bit into the different plants, and then we'll just kind of open this up for a conversation. So ayahuasca is definitely one of the more popular ones in kind of the minds of people at this point. And that's a brew that has been down in South American jungles for a long time. And it's a combination of high DMT content leaf, or several different leaves. Leaves are chacruna, opoyaje, wambisa, and they contain either DMT, NN-DMT, or 5-MeO-DMT. But that's not generally orally active unless you combine it with an MAOI, something that inhibits the breakdown of these different compounds. So they found that the combination of the ayahuasca vine, which is the MAOI, with the DMT-containing leaf allow for an orally active DMT experience. And the DMT experience is really unlike any other experience you could ever imagine. It seems to really open up a portal to an entirely separate dimension, whereas a lot of the other plants kind of open up the Venetian blinds to allow you to see this dimension in a different way. The DMT is really like, you're really going to see something else. The ayahuasca inherently, though, is very challenging on the GI system, cleansing, but challenging on the GI system. So it has a reputation as the vine of death. Why? Well, because you feel so bad and you're tripping so hard that it pretty much convinces you that you're going to die the first time you do it. And that's part of the gift of it, is that you have to face your death. And that's one of the most pervasive fears that we all have, is this fear of death. And ayahuasca will put your face right into it until you surrender to that fear. I remember the first time I went down and did it, it started going through this escalated progression of the different ways that I was dying. First, there were spiders that were crawling in my eyeballs. And the spiders were crawling in my eyeballs, and they were going to explode in my brain, and then spiders were just going to come out of my face. And I was like, ooh, that was a good one. 1 point for ayahuasca, 0 points for Aubrey. But then I was still kind of cool with that. I was like, okay, I'm cool with that. And then, so these eels came up out of this is all in my vision, of course, but the eels came up out of the river, and they went and burrowed into my insides and just started thrashing around and eating all my organs on the inside of my body. I was like, ooh, that was particularly uncomfortable, but I'm cool with that. And then it continued, and then I envisioned myself sliding down this long vine of thorns, like Jack and the Beanstalk style, long vine of thorns, and I was completely naked, and the thorns were all pointing up. And that was really, really, I thought, rude of ayahuasca to put me through that one. But again, I was kind of cool with that. So ayahuasca had to pull, an even greater trick out of its bag. It's like, oh, Aubrey, by the way, you're dying of cancer right now. Right now, you're dying of cancer. I was like, that got me freaked out. No, I'm not. I'm healthy. I'm healthy. I'm strong. What do you mean? I'm not dying of cancer. And it meant a resistance point. It meant an actual fear, something that I was genuinely afraid of. And I wrestled with that for about 2 hours on the mat, where every different way I tried to wiggle out with my mind and convince myself, no, I'm not. I'm young. I'm good. Everything's good. Ayahuasca, would win, and it would convince me the other way, until finally I surrendered. And in life, that's a really challenging thing, because you're used to seeing a problem and then hitting it with force. I will overcome that thing. I will conquer that thing. I will beat that opponent. I will rise above. And in the plant medicine journeys, you have to invert that entirely. I will surrender deeper. I will bow lower. And it's this whole reverse process that you have to learn. But when you do, that's when the great rewards come. So eventually I surrendered into that and said, if that's the way, if that's the truth, if that's the way I'm going, then so be it. It's been a great life. And the minute I did that, the whole thing shifted, and all of this love came up from the earth. It was kind of like that scene from Avatar, where all these fibers sucked me in and cradled me into the earth. It's like, we're just kidding, man. Everything's good. You're all good. I was like, oh, God. So that was my first encounter with the vine of death, and really, helped me transcend both the fear of death and the fear of suffering. And you learn these things, but you don't always get to keep the gains at 100%. You have to go back and you have to continue up your practices and continue to access these truths. You reach these peaks. It's very difficult to stay at that peak, but you get a new baseline set. You get a new truth that you can fall back on. So ayahuasca is amazing for overcoming fear. Fear is something that's in your life. That's one of the best medicines, and what I would say, what I would prescribe for anybody if fear is a root cause, which fear is a cause for all of us. Another great one for another great medicine is Wachuma, and Wachuma is San Pedro cactus. It's been around for thousands of years, and interestingly, there was a society, pre-Incan society, called Chavin in Peru, and this society flourished for about 800 years. And it really puzzles the archaeologists, because during that 800-year period, there was no war. There was no evidence of weapons and destruction and all the normal shit you see in human society. During that whole stretch in that region, there's none of that. Well, what they the people who are curious have not taken Wachuma and figured that out, because Wachuma was the sacrament of the Chavin people, and they would offer it to anybody who came. And it's one of the most heart-expanding medicines that I've ever encountered. So really gets you back in touch with a love for life, a love for one another, a love for humanity. So for me, that medicine is more about finding your mission, and reinvigorating your love for life, and your passion to contribute to this planet, your ability to see one another as self living a different life. And that's been a really great gift from the medicine Wachuma. Iboga is an African shrub, and that comes from Gabon, and it's definitely the gnarliest of the medicines. So that is truly throwing yourself in the frying pan. So the medicine lasts about 24 hours, and the whole time you're relentlessly nauseous. I mean, ayahuasca gets you nauseous, like stomach flu gets you nauseous, but iboga gets you on this new level of nauseous. Like it like recalibrates nausea for you. It feels like you're stuck in a high voltage shed, like everything's buzzing, like zzz. You can't, if you open your eyes, it's like you're looking, everything is like that TV channel that didn't get any proper signal, and it's like all lines and stuff like that, and your heart's pounding because it's a stimulant. That's why it lasts 24 hours. So you got 24 hours of your heart pounding in this high voltage shed, in nausea. It's so uncomfortable that like just the endorphins you get from moving like here just gives you that moment of relief that you think, and you just fight for that on your mat, can't move for 24 hours. It's hell. It's truly, truly hell. And the thing about these plants is that it's like they know how long they have with you, too. So whereas, some of the shorter acting plants will give you lessons really quick. It's like, all right, I got you for how long? I got 5 minutes? Okay, we're going to go in here, we're going to grab this thing. Iboga's got time for days. So it'll stretch something out. I remember I've taken it twice, which you may ask, why would you take that thing twice? It's because the first time was so powerful. And for me, well, I'll tell the first story first. For me, that's when I really got to identify truly and name the three elements of myself. The iboga told me that this was mud body. This was my meat sack, my vehicle, the car that I was driving around in. And I really got to understand what this thing was all about. These 7 trillion cells that have all decided to work in cooperation for the betterment of themselves and the organism. And got to get in touch with that, what its needs were, what its desires were, and then the relationship that had with the mind. And the mind being the computer on board that, sends signals and allows things to optimize survival and procreation, all of these things. And then really understand what my consciousness was and really see the trinity of this. And iboga's ruthless, too. I actually went down there with my fiance, who I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, and then for about 6 hours, it convinced me that we should break up. And I was like, what the hell? Like, that's not what I came down here for. And, again, it's just me wrestling with my mind. And, of course, I very much love my fiance, but both of us would agree that splitting up was the best thing we could have done, and we're very good friends now. So a lot of insight can come when you have these long times. With iboga. A lot of lessons, a lot of questions that you can get answered. It also gave me access to, communicate and just understand the world in a much different way. So that's why I did it again, despite the hell. But when I did it again, I kind of forgot how bad it was. So then I was doing it, and I was like, oh, no. Like, what did I do? Why did I do this? And then it proceeded, since it knew it had 24 hours, it proceeded to show me that I was a terrible person for like 6 hours. Like just the worst person ever. I was like, man, I really suck. And then like 6 hours in, it's like, nah, just kidding, but don't be that person. I was like, oh, this is the worst. I don't recommend iboga. Iboga is very well known for getting people out of addictions because it's really like being an ant on a tuning fork. And you're that ant on the tuning fork and it just goes, whang. And all of these vibrations, all this weird shit that you have going on, there's no room for that anymore. It all gets shaken clean. It's like clean slate. So clinics like Crossroads Clinic down in Mexico having amazing above 90% heroin addiction cure rates. Whereas obviously standard care, methadone, all these other things are getting you addicted to a different substance, and the recidivism rate is super high. So it's extremely powerful for that. And honestly, unless you have a significant addiction, I'm not sure Iboga is really the way you need to go. I think there's like kinder, gentler ways to do this. So hopefully pretty soon, if MAPS does what it's able to do, we'll be able to have legal MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, and then if you really want to escalate things, and ayahuasca and these different other medicines. I like the ritualized context of these medicines too. There's different ways that you can play with these things on your own, and sometimes that can have value, but sometimes that can carry a lot of risk as well. Setting the right container, the right space, the right intention, the right people, the right medicine, super crucial. These aren't things to be trifled with. I really can't more strongly emphasize that. What you put into it on the front end is going to be what you get out of it on the back end. So if you're really serious about using these as tools for consciousness, not just a carnival ride, then really pay attention to that setting. I think that's crucial. So obviously there's other different types of medicines and different ways that you can do that. But to me, whenever things are off, and whenever I'm out of touch, or whenever something's going weird, I feel out of control, I feel confused, I just go back to these technologies. I just know that as soon as my consciousness is in the driver's seat, I'll figure it out. One way or another, it's going to be all right. I'm going to be standing on a stage somewhere and giving a talk. Everything's going to be okay. And I think that's an important thing for everybody to remember, is like, we're all pretty much batting 1,000. We're all here. We're all right. But nonetheless, as we project out into the future, everything looks like, nah, that one's going to take me out for sure. But really, in the end, having the faith that I'm going to be all right. It's going to work out one way or another. And generally that's going to be rewarded a lot more than the fear. Now, it doesn't mean you don't plan for shit, but that's an important thing. And consciousness, and accessing that is a great way to remind you of that, and to ensure that process happens quickly. So that's a little bit of my journey. I definitely want to leave a lot of time for questions. I'm here, and I just want to be of service to you guys. And I've experienced a lot of different stuff, and so any kind of personal questions or things that you guys are stuck with, let's have a chat. Sound good? Cool.
So with the ibogaine,
Mm-hmm.
you went and had how many fully conscious people around you when you were in that state?
Well, I had a shaman's assistant, and then my fiance at the time. So there was 2 of us under, and 2 people guiding. Okay. She asked how many people were there at the ceremony when I was doing Iboga, and there was 2 shamans, one shaman's assistant, and then both of us were down at the same time. And they had a shift change at about hour 16, I'd say, where a nurse started checking in on us. You got a question? Yeah.
Is it on? Doesn't sound like it's on.
It looks like it's on, but it's not.
Whoa.
You mentioned the idea of there are different ways to go about taking the plant medicines, and you fully support the idea of the shamanic ritual as opposed to just taking it on your own. And I was wondering if you might elaborate a little more on that with this consideration, which is for some people, having the shaman present is adding an additional narrative that might be influencing their own. I've done both. So I have a friend who's done it on his own, and he did all the research on his own, and he prefers that. And then I've had the experience where it was like with the shaman, and it was more like the idea that ayahuasca, there's a plant spirit, and referred to as a feminine kind of plant spirit, and there's a lot of like kind of leading, and I'm just wondering what, if anything, what your take on that is.
Well, it's an interesting question, for sure, and I think there's no exact answer to that because it depends on the quality of the experience, the individual and the shaman. There's a lot of like individualized parts to this. If a shaman's good, they are working with the technology that they understand to a very good degree, and so they can guide that technology and help you access greater, different parts of that technology that you wouldn't be able to access before. So if you're with a good shaman, in the ayahuasca ceremony, the Icaros are so powerful, the songs that they sing. Those songs can often guide your visions and guide your journey in certain ways that doing it on your own could never touch. I mean, I'm certain of that. But, a good shaman is also, the ideal of a shaman is to be a hollow bone, is to not push anything forward. And the shamans who are not as good and not as skilled or have other agendas, they become more than that, and they start to influence you beyond that. And then they start to push into your field of energy rather than just helping draw out more. I mean, the songs really, and the whole ceremony should be designed just to maximize what you can experience yourself, and then they should be an empty, hollow receiver of that, not pushing out anything forward. And the great shamans are like that. Now, another average random shaman, it may be better to do it by yourself. And I think, one of the things that, there's certainly some of them that even perhaps exacerbate the fear that people have leading in. They can actually, fear is, I think, the ultimate virus. It's a virus that we catch from one another all the time without even realizing it. And a shaman, if they're not good, can actually spread that virus and create more fear surrounding it, more fear of the mythology of these different things. So, I think it's a balance. It's a balance between what they can offer, and then also, is there a cost associated with it, and how good are they? How skilled are they at the technique? And also, what medicine you're doing. I think, really the shaman should be kind of like a doctor in your psychic surgery, and they're knowing what to prescribe, knowing how to do it, knowing the aftercare, and just allowing you to not worry about all that shit, not have that doubt like, did I take too much? Am I going to die? Like, did I mix that brew right? Did I do all these different things? All of that can be really challenging and is partly, the issue with most of these people freaking out on bad trips. It's because you don't really know if you poison yourself or not. You have no idea, because you're not an expert. You're not a doctor, so it's just like kind of going in there with the surgical tools and being like, yeah, that's about right. I watched YouTube. I think it's good. So I think that's kind of where my take is. But obviously, a bad shaman is going to be a lot worse than, you with some good music sitting around doing it yourself. So that's kind of where my opinion is. Does that answer your question, or yeah?
So, do you ever fight like consumerism, like the idea that if you buy, like when people buy something, like the product makes them feel good? Do you ever fight like that feeling, or like maybe going back to nature? Like I love running in the rain, so that's pretty fun. Like I feel like that nature, like I just feel good. I feel like myself. And also I wanted to ask, why did you start on it? Like, are you like genuinely? You seem like you genuinely trying to help people out. So I'm sure like realizing their consciousness is the best way to go.
Yeah. I don't know if I completely understand your first question. I think, so, I'll just jump into the second one. I think, for me, consciousness is like the tip of a pyramid. And in order to escalate up that pyramid, you have to take care of some basic needs. You have to have ample energy, and you have to be out of pain. If you look at any animal, when the animal's in pain, it's the last animal you want to come and hug. No matter what it is, it could be your friendliest cat, but if that animal is sick or in pain, that thing's going to hiss and lash out at you. And I think all of us, most of us at least, are carrying a certain degree of pain and a certain degree of lack of energy that creates this kind of solipsistic, inward-focused, thing that we're all in here with our dinosaur shells and scales on, like, don't fuck with me, I'm hurting. I'm hurting here. You don't even know. Like, I'll kill you. And that's the attitude that we have instead of just really opening up and embracing people. And so on, it's a way to take care of those basic needs, and then once those basic needs of getting your body feeling good, getting your muscles working, getting everything moving in the right direction, once those basic needs are taken care of, then the rest of this stuff really has fertile ground. Because when you're really, when you're really in pain, you don't have energy, you're sick, it's super hard to access your consciousness. Not impossible. Certainly you can do it. You can do it in any situation, but it becomes a lot easier when everything else is taken care of.
Okay, so to follow up on what she was asking, I was wondering, you keep saying shaman, and I was wondering if there was a possibility of moving beyond that language to a more, commonality, the more, or possibly atheistic language to where it's, because I know a lot of people are avoiding these experiences because of some kind of spiritual belief system seems to be involved, when in fact it's a personal experience and not a religious construct. So instead of a shaman, could it not just be an experienced individual that knows how to keep someone from choking on their own vomit?
Yeah.
You
So
know,
the
that
difference between- the
accepts
difference
that you
between
have
guide-
intentions
Yeah.
and will make sure that you get guided with those intentions if you start to go off track, kind of.
So it's the difference between a guide and a shaman is kind of what you're saying. And I think there's, a guide or a sitter, a lot of times they're just called sitters, just someone with a good heart who's just kind of keeping it, around you, keeping it chill, making sure that, your basic needs are met. And I think that's cool, and that's definitely an advised way to do it if another skilled practitioner isn't there. But shaman certainly isn't religious. I mean, the shamans, it's a show, not tell art. They're not trying, religions are all the art of telling. They tell you these things that you should believe and say, okay, these are our beliefs, I'm going to tell you these, and believe them. And whereas the shamans are like, find out for yourself, find out for yourself. What? That's not. Oh, you're getting really tricky now. If you're saying that they're imposing the belief that you should find things out for yourself, I think that's a very fair belief to impose. That's not a religion. The belief of figure it out for yourself is certainly not a religion. I don't think that falls into the definition of religion, and at least in my definition. Your definition could be different. That's cool too. But it's not that all shamans are like that. Some shamans can get religious. So the word shaman can mean a variety of different things, and it can create, certainly create issues. To me, a good shaman is exactly that, someone who allows you to see your own truths, and gets out of the fucking way. That's all a good shaman is just get out of the way. Help, remove all the obstacles so you can come forward with your best truth. And that's really what a shaman is. And anything else, somebody's sitting there, providing the ceremony. I've had both, and that's awesome. Like, just someone who's just like, you cool, you need some water? Like, they're acting as a shaman. They're just trying to get out of the way. They're not saying, like, they're not trying to implant stuff in your head or tell you anything. They're just, at the kind of base level of shamanry, just being empty, not putting their energy onto you. And so that is a shaman to a certain degree. And I think we mystify that term so much and think of them like a priestly class. It's not. Anybody can be a shaman. It's just a matter of how they're able to get their own stuff out of the way. That, to that degree, that determines, what level they're at. But so to me, I think that's just the most important thing. At the highest form of the art, they're the emptiest person in the room, and that really allows you to come forward to the greatest degree. And I think that's the difference. And also the difference between shamanism and religion is generally, the implanting of an idea, whereas shamanism is, come forward with your greatest truth. And I think that's the differentiation that I have.
So related to the idea of intentions, like I'm wondering if you have any ideas about people that you care about that you think maybe would benefit from plant medicine, but obviously, balancing that fine line between, taking an active role in like you don't want to force someone to do something, but kind of, I guess, that the social balance of promoting something that you think would be good, but not forcing it.
Yeah, I've screwed that up before. For sure screwed that up before. With my girlfriend currently, who I live with, I was so stoked on Iboga and what it was able to give to me, I basically strongly encouraged her, like, you got to try it, it's amazing. It's going to hurt, but it's amazing. And it was a totally shitty experience for her. And she wouldn't have done that experience if I wasn't, kind of raving about what I was able to do. And I learned a really stark lesson there. I was like, whoa, like, really the only thing that we can do is show the change and be, embody what we've experienced. And I tried the same thing with my family. I tried to get my family to go down and do ayahuasca and do all this stuff until finally I just rid myself of that desire of trying to, again, like a bad shaman, putting my thing on them and making them go do it, just to really embody how I felt and, tell the story as cleanly as possible. And then all of a sudden they're like, man, we want to go down there and do it. I was like, whoa. So I think the only thing that you can do is just be open and just explain how that affected you, and they'll see that. And if they're ready to see that and they're ready for that, they'll come forward and they'll answer that calling. But anytime I've tried to push people into it, it's been generally met with less than desirable results. So I've learned kind of the hard way that just embody that feeling that you receive from these things, and the people will come forward when they're ready. Does that answer your question? Cool.
So I've started looking into having the ayahuasca experience, but in my research, being a woman, I've heard that's kind of especially dangerous to do alone, and that's maybe not the intention I have to do it alone. However, do you have any advice for finding a good shaman, or any tips on avoiding pitfalls, any common pitfalls in that experience?
Yeah, it's generally good to, get advice from people who have been there and know these different centers, know the different places well, but it's also hard because it's hard to be fully aware of what's going on when the game is being played at, different levels that are above your awareness. So for me, I've experienced a lot of these different things, and I'm pretty plugged in. So I'm comfortable. I have no financial interest in any ayahuasca centers, but I'm comfortable recommending a few. I have those on my website, aubreymarcus.com/FAQ, and you can read about them. There's about 3 centers or so that I can recommend are impeccable in that nature, because you're absolutely right. You talk to somebody like my friend Amber Lyon, who runs Reset.me, and she got her boobs fondled the first time she was doing ayahuasca, which is not exactly what you want to have happen in your first trip down to the jungle. So that's certainly a common story, and you hear it all the time. It's, again, just that kind of jungle mentality of strong preying on the weak, and it's unfortunate. But there's a couple centers that I can recommend that I know are practicing at both moral and medicinal standards.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
So you've been referring to a lot of the plant-based medicine as technologies.
Mm-hmm.
Have you actually applied other actual more technical approaches to achieving some of these same results? Like there are neurofeedback, biofeedback facilities that people can go to and kind of, in the same way, be in isolation. And with regards to like a shaman, there's people probably turning knobs behind the scenes that put you into an experience for a period of time that I think people come out of it with some of the same awareness and consciousness effects.
Yeah, so I consider flotation, sensory deprivation, one of those technologies. Certainly that doesn't occur naturally in nature. I use the Muse headband, which is a portable EEG device that helps with biofeedback for meditation. I think that's a great piece of technology. I think I'm waiting for some of that kind of other more brute force brainwave manipulation to kind of flower a little more and let the research get a little more definite on that before I go tinkering in that way. But that's just a personal preference. I think if you want to be on the frontier of that, I think it's going to be very promising. And ultimately, you know, manipulating our brainwave patterns is going to be really essential. I think binaural beats is another interesting thing that I've played with, which is a technology to help with brainwave entrainment. So there's a lot of different things that I do play with, but you know, I'm a little scared of the kind of the brute force methods that are still out there now, and I'm going to kind of hold back. I mean, I'm still listening to Pandora. I'm not even on Spotify yet. You know, I let things, you know, have their time first. How are you? Oh, you're right here? Cool.
How you doing, Aubrey?
Good.
So you spoke on some of the more exotic plant medicines.
Mm-hmm.
My question was on the more conventional one, which is cannabis and magic mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
With the magic mushrooms, I've heard Rogan talk about the heroic dose. And
Fuck that.
Why do you say that?
You know, I think people, the heroic dose, it's like aggrandizing this move, like I'm going to rip myself to shreds and then find the truth of the others. I think
like
it's really unnecessary.
I guess it's the concept of a heroic dose.
Right, and that's
overcoming.
what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's a bad question, or I'm not saying that concept. I'm saying, like, I don't recommend it, is what I'm saying. I'm saying minimum effective dose. You know, like that's how you build a hero. It's not like throw them into the garbage disposal and hope they come out alive, you know. I've tried that method. I tried that a bunch. And it's generally not preferable to that minimum effective dose. What's going to get you there without pushing you too far? It's like any good workout. You know, like you can go to the gym and thrash yourself and get rhabdo and have to sit out for, you know, 3 weeks after you're done because you're all fucked up and you got injuries and shit. Or you can just push yourself to that point where you're really working, you're breaking down muscles, but your body has time to recover. It's the same with the psyche. You want to push yourself, of course, but you want to give yourself enough time to recover and not let things get completely shook out. And so I think the concept of heroic dose is problematic. I think really, you know, you build this like you build a true hero. You know, how is a hero built? Well, time and time again, working at his craft, working at his skill, you know, getting better, battling resistance. You know, so I think that's kind of the key. So for me, you know, gram and a half of mushrooms, I don't go over that. You know, I don't think that, you know, I don't think that you need to. I think you can just push that as much as you need, and I have certainly gone way over that. And there is something to be said for that at the right time in the right place, for sure. But for me, I think minimum effective dose is definitely what you're looking for. You're going to get the best results, whether you're working out in the gym or you're working out your psyche. So that's kind of my magic mushroom. Mushrooms are an interesting one. You know, they're certainly a strong ally for me. I feel like they're like an older brother, you know, whereas some of these are like, you know, more like grandfathers where you just sit and listen to the wisdom. You know, mushrooms, you know, they'll fuck with you a little bit, but they'll teach you some stuff. And so they've been a strong ally for me along the path. And they've taken me to some of the most intense experiences and some of the most pleasurable experiences. You know, and I've really developed a relationship where I feel comfortable with that medicine outside of kind of a shamanic container. So it's been a real ally for me, certainly in that regard. But, you know, it's definitely something, again, as long as you stick with minimum effective dose, I think that's really the way to go. And then cannabis, I think, has a lot of value and a lot of promise as well. Certainly it's one of the most recreationally abused medicines, but when you're actually, you know, using it with an intention, I think for me, the intention that I get out of cannabis is just body awareness, like somatic awareness. Like if I want to figure out why my neck is hurting up here, you know, and I eat enough cannabis, then I'll start to track that down, and I'll find like tense spots in my body and just really kind of understand how my energy force is working. Really good for different things like that. And also, you know, unlocking creativity and different other aspects. So I'm really happy that the world is growing up and not throwing people in jail for these.
And when you use cannabis, do you experience the paranoia that a lot of people do? And what does that tell you about using it? Does that tell you anything, or does that just mean use less?
You know, it's funny, like, a lot of people come to me and talk to me about psychedelics, and they're like, man, I don't know if I could do that because I ate too much weed once, and it was fucking intense. I was like, yeah, I ate weed too much once too, or more than once, and it's the worst thing ever. It's like, when you go overboard on that, and again, you're not abiding by that minimum effective dose kind of mentality, it's hell. Like, it's not an easy ride. Certainly not. It's not like just because this is the one that's the most legal and most accessible that it's like a patsy. It's a beast. And if you go overboard and you do too much, you're going to have to pay the consequences. And as far as the anxiety, I'm not sure that cannabis creates anxiety or just reveals the anxiety that you already have inherently within you, and so allowing you to work through it. I'm not convinced that it's actually planting anything there at all. It's almost like, damn, I've been anxious this whole time. I've been paranoid this whole time. Now I get a chance to look at it like, okay, well, how do I get through this? Well, the anxiety is linked to a fear. Well, what's the fear linked to? Well, fear is linked to this, and then you just start to track it all the way through, and then you can work through it. Cool.
I have
A microphone there.
I'll see if I can word this question correctly. So you seem to be very much a man at peace, and I was just wondering, when you get back from these medicinal journeys, what kind of how that influences the decisions in your life, and how it is that you maintain the peace. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's so integration is a really important part of these things. That's the recovery from these intense psychic workouts. And again, I've screwed that up a bunch of times. I've jumped right back in. I've been in the jungle 16 days and be like, shit, what's going on with my company? And jumped back into 14-hour days and completely fried myself on the way back, and certainly did not look like a peaceful man at those points as well. But I think the key is you got to realize like the extent to which like what you've pushed yourself through, and then having enough time and ample time to recover and kind of reintegrate. That's really, really crucial. Otherwise, things get out of balance. And in general, I'm constantly remembering and forgetting, remembering, forgetting, remembering, forgetting. But each time, I feel like the forgetting gets a little bit shorter, and the remembering gets a little bit easier, and the baseline starts to move gradually, gradually. So the level of, the baseline level is just, steadily moving, and that to me is the sign of optimization. But at the same time, the graph looks like a bad stock day. I mean, it's up and down all the time, and I'm not immune to the struggles and the franticness and the panics and all of that, but ultimately that base level of just peace and access to consciousness. Oh, sure. I mean, my lifestyle's constantly evolving. I'm constantly changing the people that I mean, I don't, I'm not someone that gets kind of stuck or attached to things very much, so I'm just moving with what I think will be the optimal experience. Again, seeking that path that's going to bring the best to me and my life. So, the more expansive I get, it's also another interesting thing. Like, you start to create, energy, almost gravity, that starts to pull other like-minded people towards you. The more that you push out this kind of message and this emanation of just the consciousness that you're accessing, the more other people will kind of like, and then you'll start to draw in other people along that way. So I found that process certainly happening, and certainly appreciated. It really feels like the wind is at your back when stuff like that's happening, and that's great. And, sometimes it feels like you're running uphill in a headwind too, but it's part of life. That's what makes you stronger.
Aubrey, thanks a lot for bringing this fascinating information to us.
You're welcome, Kev.
I've had the opportunity to hear you speak several times at conferences like this, and I've tuned into a lot of your podcasts. And I've always respected the strength and courage that you showed as such a strong advocate for these kinds of medicines and these techniques. But I often also find myself wondering what kind of challenges you face personally, kind of bridging these two worlds, where, like, on one hand, you're a very successful business person, you have a very public profile when it comes to that, and yet also somehow you manage to bring this other more esoteric subject in and table that. I'm wondering if you have advice for people about how to be a strong advocate for psychedelics and plant medicines and things like that without it disrupting your professional business world and things like that.
Yeah, well, thanks, Kev. Appreciate the kind words. You know, I think, to me, I'm just committed to telling the truth and providing myself as a service to, you know, a service to as many people as possible. And to me, it would feel weird to succeed but hold this back. Like, I have secrets. These are my secrets. You know, like, this has helped me. This has helped me a lot. So I got to talk about it, whether that hurts me or not. So it's almost like not even a question, you know, like I can't do any other. You know, I have to talk about these things because that would violate a code that's much deeper than any of this. So, and I just try to tell it as straightforward as possible. I think where a lot of people, you know, they get attached to these things and they get, you know, too identified with it, and they push that out there too much, you know, and so it becomes like, I am the mystical man. Look at me, mystical man, you know, and people are like, fuck you, you know. So I think that's kind of an issue, and it can go the other way too, you know. Obviously, you can be like, oh, fuck anything with spirituality, you know. Everybody tries to identify with one thing, and I just try to tell it like it is. You know, I've had amazing spiritual experiences and amazing corporeal experiences, and, you know, I enjoy a nightclub and an ayahuasca ceremony both, and I'm cool with that. And I think that's, you know, I think that just really resonates with people, that message, and it's really made it easy, because I approach it from a point of practicality, like, this has helped me. You know, do you like things that help you or no? It's like, this has helped me. You do it if you want. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it.
So, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I'm so glad that you guys had a really productive discussion. We need to set up for the next speaker,
Cool.
but let's give a really big